physician coaching is a relatively new thing. And what we have figured out is that we can work on our mindset as physicians. And we have these incredibly smart brains, obviously, and our brains are this super valuable asset. And yet, the ways that we're trained in our training and medical school and residency, and we'll talk a bit about that, can actually make it difficult for us to find contentment, to have sustainable careers, to enjoy what we're doing long-term. And they put us at even higher risk for burnout than we otherwise might be just from the situation of medicine itself. And so I consider coaching, it's a little bit like professional athlete coaching. So professional athletes have coaches for literally everything. And as physicians, we don't. And so if you think about coaching as more of a performance tool and a sustainability tool and a tool to sort of be the best version of yourself, rather than something you come to when you're broken or needing help, it helps a lot of physicians jump in and take advantage of it. And when you are actually reaching out for it when you're not in distress, you can get even more out of it. And so I encourage you to think about it that way. It's different than therapy, different than mentoring, and different than advice. And I am actually a co-host of a podcast, and there's a podcast that talks about how coaching is different than all those. So I'm going to refer you to that rather than spend an hour on it. And I will put it in the follow-up email so you all can listen to it. The podcast is called the Mindful Healers Podcast, and it's episode 85. And I'll put the link in the follow-up email. But essentially, coaching is different than therapy in that if you have a pathologic mental health condition, you should be seeing a therapist, you should be seeing a psychiatrist. And we really look at moving forward. We really look at it as sort of optimizing how you're showing up. And we really look at it as evaluating mindset patterns that have to do with the way that we work and the way that we interact with others and being strategic about it. And so it can help us when we're feeling anxious, overwhelmed, people-pleasing, burnt out, but it shouldn't replace therapy. Many people actually do therapy and coaching at the same time. And I will say that a lot of physicians, having worked in physician wellness for such a long time, are very hesitant about getting therapy and psych care. And so they will do coaching because it's something they feel comfortable with. And as a coach, when you work with a physician coach, we are pretty good at sort of saying, hey, this actually needs mental health care. So I don't want anyone doing this instead of mental health care. And if any of you who come to work with me one-on-one, I feel like you need that, I will definitely send you that way. It's also different than mentoring. So mentoring, you all should have mentors in your fellowship program, and thinking about mentoring as someone who's sharing their lived experience. It's like a guide or someone who really clearly gives you advice. And so in coaching, we don't give you advice. We help you see your thought patterns and how they're impacting your life, and how, if you would like to have your life feel different, look different, how you can change your thinking in that way. So coaching is also really very much about tools and strategies. And so I like to think of them as practical, actionable strategies. And so your colleagues from previous years have said that coaching helps you think strategically. It brings in healthier alternative thought processes and ways of thinking. You tend to realize that you're not alone, especially in these group sessions. And you start to notice the ways that you think and the ways that you approach your life that are not helpful. And most of us have never paused or taken the time or slowed down enough to see that. And so that's really what coaching helps us with. Most importantly, I think as high achievers, we tend to be very action fix-it oriented. And what I've discovered in coaching is 90% of the work is in noticing the thought patterns and awareness. And that's where we get the biggest benefit. Then we can shift it, but that can take some time. It also helps managing imposter syndrome and really cleaning up your thinking so that a lot of these thought patterns, which is something we're going to talk about today, that cause us harm and get in our way and cause a lot of burnout and exhaustion and depletion, we can step out of those when we see them. And imposter syndrome is one of those. So one of the reasons that coaching has come to medicine is that we are in many ways the equivalent of high performance athletes, fellows in particular. If you think about the length of your shifts, if you think about the lengths of a career, and you think about sort of the high stakes and life and death. And so of course, having support would be helpful. The other reason is, sadly, as you all know, the system is pretty broken right now. And then we have a pandemic on top of it. And so because of all of that, it isn't that in coaching we ignore that. It's just that we can't wait for all that to be fixed to help ourselves. And so I see coaching as sort of a life raft, or like a motor to get you to shore. And when we take care of ourselves and we step out of some of these old thought patterns of martyrdom and self-sacrifice and catastrophizing, we can actually become empowered and start to solve some of these problems ourselves. And so who better to solve the problems in medicine than the physicians who care the most? And so I see coaching as a tool to help us get there. It also helps us essentially use our smart brains for us, is what I like to say, rather than letting them go rogue. When they go rogue, a brain goes naturally to the negative. And so when we can give our brain directions and quick thought flips and secrets and tricks that we can throw in there so that we can think more positively and think strategically, it can help us step out of these maladaptive patterns and actually be really productive in saving medicine, the medicine we love, and getting back to practicing in ways that feel authentic and good to us. There's a lot of evidence around it for those of you who think it's a little bit woo. So there's many studies now showing that it's evidence-based intervention for burnout, exhaustion. Very specifically, they've looked at the Maslow burnout studies. They've looked at resilience and quality of life for physicians. And there's a number of new studies about coaching in trainees. So we have tried as physician coaches to bring coaching to residents, fellows, and then of course attendings. So I mostly coach attendings, but I've been coaching with your program for 4 years, and I coach cardiology fellows in another program. And what I have found, so I'm a pediatrician by training, and I like to think about sort of developmental stages. And I think fellowship is really the perfect spot for this intervention, because you all could be attendings. Your medical knowledge is pretty much sealed in. And so it's the perfect time to transition from sort of a trainee mindset to a mindset that's going to be healthy for a long and sustainable and satisfying career. The other thing that I know from working with all of you is that you guys are under tremendous stress. And being a fellow is tricky by that very nature of what I said, which is that attendings, you could be an attending and yet you have attendings. And so some of you also were attendings and have come back to being fellows. And so there's a lot in that communication dynamic that for many of you may be challenging. And for many of you, you've been at this training for, I can't remember, I worked with a fellow who'd maybe been training for 15 years, like they've done 3 fellowships and they're doing all these things. Like it's a long haul. And so many of you are quite burnt out and depleted. And so coaching is a way of figuring out, okay, given those situations, we can't change the situation of fellowship. How can we optimize your experience, optimize your performance, minimize the wasted energy, which none of you have any extra energy to waste. So things that coaching can help with are normalizing reactions, identifying those limiting beliefs or beliefs that get in your way, thoughts that keep you stuck, that keep you anxious, doubting yourself, feeling guilty. Shame, blame, and guilt are very much in our medical culture. We tend to not like uncertainty. And so we can do some work around some of those things. It can also help you process unexpected outcomes. It can help with relationships. And a lot of people come to their one-on-one coaching with issues with relationships at home. I did some coaching with one of your colleagues about trying to be a parent and a fellow at the same time, and how do you become an attending and a parent, and how do you find a way to integrate those, and changing the thoughts from our natural scarcity mindset to looking and bringing other ways to think about it that make you feel much more empowered. And so I think of coaching as an empowerment tool. I also help folks with time management. People pleasing is a big one. relationships with attendings or transitioning to attendings, and even sort of brainstorming how to show up for job searches empowered, rather than a lot of the medical culture makes us feel lucky to get a job, and yet it's really the opposite. And so helping you show up empowered and strong after going through all of this training situation, which makes us not show up in that way. And so we can do a little bit of work around that.